You are here right now watching this video breathing. But stop for a moment. Have you ever truly felt your breath? I'm not just talking about knowing that you're breathing, but actually tuning into it, becoming one with it, as if your entire existence could fit into that single fleeting moment when air enters your body. Let me tell you this: your breath is not just a function of survival. It is not just oxygen keeping you alive. It is a secret doorway to the infinite. It's the cheapest, yet most profound spiritual tool you'll ever have access to. Let's think about this together. Why would something so simple, something we all do 20,000 times a day, hold the key to the deepest truths about life, about ourselves, and about the universe? This isn't some abstract or mystical idea. It's real, it's logical, and it's accessible to everyone, no matter who you are, where you're from, or what you believe in. You don't need money, status, or even experience. All you need is here, now, in this very second.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lessons.
When you breathe, you're not just filling your lungs. You're connecting to something far greater, something ancient, something eternal. You are participating in a rhythm that has existed since the dawn of life itself. Every breath you take is like a whisper from the cosmos, reminding you that you are alive, that you are here, and that you are connected to everything around you. And yet, how often do we ignore it? How often do we ignore it? How often do we take it for granted? Let me ask you a question. When was the last time you truly noticed your breath? Think about it. Was it during a moment of stress when your heart was racing and your chest felt tight? Was it during a moment of calm when you felt peace wash over you? Or was it never? For most of us, the answer is never. We live our lives on autopilot, rushing from one task to the next, barely pausing to notice the miracle that is happening within us at every moment. And in doing so, we miss out on one of the greatest gifts we've been given. But why is the breath so powerful? Why do so many spiritual traditions, from ancient yogis to modern mindfulness practitioners, place such an emphasis on it? To answer that, we need to look deeper. Your breath is the bridge between your body and your mind. It's the only function in your body that is both automatic and under your control. Think about that for a second. You don't have to try to breathe, it happens on its own. And yet, at any moment, you can take control of it. You can slow it down. You can speed it up. You can hold it. You can let it go. This makes the breath unique. It's like a doorway between two worlds, the unconscious and the conscious, the physical and the spiritual. When you control your breath, you're not just controlling the air that enters your lungs. You're controlling your entire state of being. Let me give you an example. Imagine you're feeling stressed. Your heart is pounding. Your thoughts are racing. You feel like the world is closing in on you. What happens when you take a deep breath? You can feel it immediately, can't you? Your heart rate slows. Your mind clears. Your body relaxes. That's not just a coincidence. That's the power of the breath. It has the ability to shift you from a state of chaos to a state of calm in an instant. It's like pressing a reset button for your entire system. But that's just the surface. The breath goes much deeper than that. In many spiritual traditions, the breath is seen as the carrier of life force, or prana. This is not just air, it's energy, it's vitality. It's the essence of life itself. When you breathe deeply and consciously, you're not just nourishing your body, you're nourishing your soul. You're tapping into a source of energy that is infinite, eternal, and always available to you. Now, let me ask you something even deeper. What happens when you stop breathing? What happens when the breath leaves you? In that moment, everything you think you are, your thoughts, your desires, your worries, your plans cease to exist. The breath is what ties you to this physical world. It's what allows you to experience life. Without it, everything fades away. So doesn't it make sense that if we want to understand life, if we want to understand ourselves, we must start with the breath? But here's the thing, most of us don't know how to breathe. Yes, we're alive, so we're obviously breathing. But we're not doing it consciously. We're not doing it fully. We're not doing it in a way that allows us to unlock its true power. Most of us take shallow breaths, barely filling our lungs, barely engaging with this incredible tool we've been given. And in doing so, we miss out on its full potential. So how do we change that? How do we start using our breath not just to survive, but to thrive? The first step is awareness. You can't change something you're not aware of. So start by simply noticing your breath. Right now, as you're watching this video, take a moment to tune in. Close your eyes if you want to. Feel the air as it enters your nose. Notice the way your chest rises and falls. Feel the subtle pause between the inhale and the exhale. Don't try to change it, just notice it. Do you feel that? That's the present moment. That's you, fully alive, fully here. Once you've become aware of your breath, the next step is to take control of it. There are countless techniques you can use, from deep belly breathing to rhythmic breathing to alternate nostril breathing. Each one has its own benefits, but they all share one thing in common: they bring you into the present moment. They connect you to yourself. They help you tap into the vast reservoir of peace, energy, and wisdom that lies within you. And here's the beautiful thing: the more you practice, the more natural it becomes. Over time, you'll find that your breath becomes your anchor, your guide, your sanctuary. No matter where you are or what you're going through, you can always return to your breath. It's always there for you, waiting to bring you back to yourself. So I'll leave you with this question: if your breath is the key to everything you've ever wanted, peace, clarity, connection, why wouldn't you use it? Why wouldn't you take the time to explore it, to understand it, to master it? The answer is up to you. When you focus on your breath, something remarkable happens. It's as if time itself begins to slow down. The noise of the world fades, and what's left is something so simple, so ordinary, that it's easy to overlook its significance. But this simplicity is exactly why it's so powerful. The breath doesn't demand anything from you. It doesn't ask for belief or effort. It's just there, quietly keeping you alive, whether you notice it or not. Yet, in that simplicity lies a profound truth: that most of us miss. The breath is where your life meets the present moment. There is no future breath. There is no past breath. There is only this one. Now, think about how often we live outside of that moment. Our minds are constantly jumping between what happened yesterday and what might happen tomorrow. Even as you're sitting here listening, your thoughts might be drifting, thinking about what you'll do later, replaying something that annoyed you earlier, or hoping for something better in the days to come. This is the nature of the mind. It pulls us away, scattering our attention in 1,000 different directions. And yet, the breath is always here, grounding us, reminding us that life is not happening somewhere else, it's happening now. Have you ever noticed how your breath changes depending on how you feel? When you're angry, it's short and sharp. When you're scared, it's shallow. When you're calm, it's soft and steady. The breath is like a mirror, reflecting your inner state. But here's the fascinating part: it's not a one-way street. Just as your emotions can shape your breathing can shape your emotions. It's one of the only tools you have that works in both directions. You can use it to interrupt patterns of stress, fear, or anger. You can use it to create calmness, focus, and clarity. It's like having a switch that you can flip at any moment to change how you feel. And yet, how often do we actually use it? Imagine this: you're in the middle of a chaotic day. Maybe you're overwhelmed with work, or your personal life feels like it's spinning out of control. In that moment, your mind is racing, your body is tense, and everything feels like too much. What do most of us do? We keep pushing. We try to think our way out of the situation, or we distract ourselves with something else. But what would happen if, instead, you paused and took just one deep breath? Not a rushed breath, not a half-hearted inhale, but a slow, full breath that fills your lungs completely. And then you let it all go. Just one breath. It doesn't solve the problem, but it changes the way you experience it. It creates space. And in that space, something shifts. This is what makes the breath so unique. It doesn't force anything. It doesn't require you to fix or solve or figure things out. It simply creates space. And in that space, you find clarity. You find calm. You find yourself. The breath doesn't take you away from your problems, it brings you closer to them, but in a way that allows you to respond instead of react. It's like stepping out of a storm and realizing that you don't have to fight the wind and rain. You can just stand there and feel it. You can let it pass. There's a reason why so many spiritual practices emphasize the breath. It's because the breath is universal. It doesn't belong to any culture, religion, or philosophy. It's not tied to any belief system. It's something we all share. When you breathe, you're doing the same thing every other human on this planet is doing. You're doing the same thing animals and plants are doing in their own way. The breath connects you to life itself. It's a reminder that you're not separate from the world around you. You're a part of it. And in that connection, there's something deeply liberating. But this connection goes even deeper. In many traditions, the breath is not just seen as a physical process. It's seen as the essence of life itself. Think about the word inspiration. It means to breathe in, but it also means to be filled with spirit, with creativity, with life. To breathe is to be inspired. And when you breathe consciously, you're not just filling your lungs with air. You're filling your entire being with something greater. Call it energy, call it life force, call it whatever you want, it doesn't matter. What matters is that it's real, and it's always there for you. Have you ever noticed the stillness at the end of an exhale? That tiny moment where you're neither breathing in nor out. It's so brief, so subtle that it's easy to miss. But in that stillness, there's a kind of presence that you can't find anywhere else. It's as if the entire universe pauses with you, just for a moment. And in that moment, there's nothing to do, nothing to achieve, nothing to be. There's just the quiet, the stillness, the now. This is where the breath can take you if you let it. Not to some far-off place, but to the very center of who you are. But here's the thing: you don't need to wait for a special moment or a perfect setting to connect with your breath. You don't need to light candles or sit cross-legged or chant mantras. You can do it anywhere, anytime. In the middle of a crowded room, while you're stuck in traffic, Even while you're scrolling through your phone watching this video, the breath doesn't care where you are or what you're doing. It's always there, waiting for you to notice it. Some might say, what's the point? It's just breathing. It's not going to change my life, but that's the irony. It's precisely because it's so ordinary that it has the power to transform everything. The breath doesn't promise anything flashy. It's not going to solve all your problems or give you instant enlightenment. What it does do is bring you back to yourself over and over again. And when you're truly present with yourself, you start to see things differently. You start to see the beauty in the ordinary, the magic in the mundane. You start to realize that the peace you've been searching for isn't out there. It's been with you all along, hidden in something as simple as your breath. I want you to think about this for a moment. If something as simple as your breath can hold this much power, what else in your life might you be overlooking? What other ordinary things might be hiding something extraordinary? The answers aren't out there. They're right here, waiting for you to notice them. When you really start paying attention to your breath, something strange happens. It feels so small, so personal, and yet it's connected to everything. You breathe in, and you're taking in the same air that's been circulating on this planet for billions of years. Think about it, the oxygen you're pulling into your lungs right now might have been exhaled by someone on the other side of the world, or by an ancient tree standing tall in a forest you've never seen, or even by a creature that lived and died long before humans existed. Your breath is not just yours, it belongs to the world. It's a quiet reminder that we're all sharing this space, this moment, this life. But there's something even deeper. Breathing is one of the few things that continues whether we notice it or not. It doesn't need your permission. It doesn't stop when you're distracted. It doesn't care whether you're happy or sad, lost or found. It just keeps going quietly in the background. And yet, the moment you choose to notice it, it's as if you've unlocked a secret. The act of breathing hasn't changed, but your awareness of it has. And that awareness changes everything. Have you ever considered what it means to exhale? It seems so simple, you're just letting go of air. But what's really happening is an exchange. With every exhale, you're releasing something that no longer serves you. You're making space. On a physical level, you're getting rid of carbon dioxide, the waste your body doesn't need. But on a deeper level, you're practicing the art of release, letting go, even for a moment. And then, with your next inhale, you're opening yourself up to something new. This cycle of taking in and letting go is constant. It's always happening, whether you notice it or not. And it's not just about your breath. It's about your life. Think about how tightly we hold on to things, ideas, beliefs, emotions, identities. We cling to them, even when they weigh us down, even when they make us suffer. But the breath shows us another way. It shows us what it means to let go, not in a forced or dramatic way, but simply, naturally, as part of the rhythm of life. Every exhale is a quiet act of surrender, and every inhale is a quiet act of trust. You don't have to control it. You just have to allow it. There's something mysterious about the way the breath operates. It's automatic, and yet you can control it. It's physical, and yet it influences your mind and emotions. It's individual, and yet it connects you to everything around you. It's as if the breath exists in a space between worlds. And when you really start working with it, you can feel that. You can feel the way it moves through you, not just as air, but as energy, as life itself. This is why so many ancient practices see the breath as more than just a function of the body. They see it as something sacred. In some cultures, the breath is seen as the carrier of the soul. In others, it's described as the thread that ties your physical body to something greater. Even in modern science, we're starting to understand just how deeply the breath affects us. It's not just about oxygen and carbon dioxide. The way you breathe can change your heart rate, your brain waves, your nervous system. It can shift you from a state of panic to a state of calm. It can open up parts of your mind and body that you didn't even know existed. And yet, it's been with you all along, quietly waiting for you to notice. Have you ever wondered why we hold our breath in moments of fear or awe? It's as if, for just a second, the breath stops to make space for something greater. When you're standing at the edge of a cliff, looking out at the vastness of the ocean, your breath catches. When you're watching a sunset that seems to stretch across the entire sky, you stop breathing without even realizing it. And in that pause, there's something indescribable, a sense of connection, of wonder, of being part of something much larger than yourself. The same thing happens in moments of deep emotion. When you're overwhelmed with sadness, your breath becomes heavy, as if the act of breathing itself is too much to carry. When you're filled with joy, your breath becomes light and quick, as if it's trying to keep up with your racing heart. The breath doesn't just respond to your emotions, it amplifies them. It brings them into focus. And when you learn to work with your breath, you're not just learning to control your body, you're learning to navigate the full spectrum of what it means to be alive. There's a practice in some traditions where you simply sit and watch your breath without trying to change it. You don't force it to be deeper or slower. You just let it happen exactly as it is. And in that practice, there's a kind of freedom. You begin to notice things you've never noticed before: the way your chest rises and falls, the subtle sound of air moving in and out, the quiet pauses between each inhale and exhale. And as you sit there, something happens. The breath shifts from being something you're doing to something that's doing you. It becomes less about effort and more about allowing. And in that allowing, you find a kind of peace that you can't get from anything else. But here's the thing: the breath isn't always peaceful. Sometimes it's jagged, uneven, uncomfortable, and that's okay. The breath doesn't pretend to be perfect, and neither should you. It shows you what's really happening inside of you, without judgment, without shame. It's honest. And in that honesty, there's a kind of wisdom. The breath teaches you that it's okay to feel everything, to feel messy, to feel broken, to feel alive. It doesn't ask you to fix anything. It just asks you to notice. At some point, every breath you take will lead to your very last one. That's the reality of being alive. But instead of seeing that as something to fear, what if it's something to honor? Every breath is a gift, not because it lasts forever, but because it doesn't. You don't know how many breaths you'll get. None of us do. And that's what makes each one so precious. So here's a thought to hold on to: if your breath is always with you, always connecting you to the present, always offering you a way to let go and take in, what would happen if you made it your guide, not just in moments of peace, but in moments of chaos, of uncertainty, of fear? What would happen if you let your breath lead you into the unknown, not as something to control, but as something to trust? There's something about the breath that goes beyond explanation. It's not just air moving in and out of your body. It feels like there's a quality to it, something alive, something more than just a physical process. When you start paying attention to it, really paying attention, it reveals things about you that you might not even realize. It's like a silent observer that's been with you since the beginning, watching your life unfold, reflecting everything back to you without words. This is where it gets interesting. As simple as the act of breathing seems, it has layers. On the surface, it's about survival oxygen for the body, energy for the cells. But then there's another layer, the way the breath changes depending on what's happening inside you. It carries more than just air. It carries your emotions, your thoughts, your state of being. If you've ever had a moment where you suddenly realized you were holding your breath, you know what I mean. The breath doesn't lie. It shows you exactly where you are, even when your mind is trying to convince you otherwise. What happens when we stop trying to control everything and let the breath lead? Imagine you're sitting quietly, and instead of focusing on your thoughts or your plans or your worries, you just notice the natural rhythm of your breathing. Maybe it's slow, maybe it's fast, maybe it feels uneven. That's okay. Instead of trying to force it into some ideal pattern, you just let it be. And as you do, you start to notice something strange. The breath begins to soften on its own. It slows down, deepens, and becomes more steady. It's as if your body knows exactly what to do, if only you'd let it. This is where the unseen comes into play. When the breath slows down, so does the mind. And when the mind slows down, something else starts to happen. You begin to notice things you didn't notice before: the feeling of the ground beneath you, the faint sound of the wind, the subtle beating of your heart. But it's not just about noticing the external world. It's about noticing what's within. There's a kind of clarity that comes when the noise quiets down, a kind of stillness that feels more alive than any amount of busyness or distraction. And it all starts with something as simple as your breath. What's fascinating is how the breath connects to everything else in your body. When you breathe deeply, your nervous system responds. Your heart rate slows, your muscles relax, your mind becomes less reactive. It's not magic, it's biology. But it feels like magic because it's so immediate. One moment, you're tense, overwhelmed, scattered. The next, after just a few breaths, everything feels different. The situation hasn't changed, but your relationship to it has. It's as if the breath acts as a reset button for your entire system. But this isn't just about feeling calm. The breath can also take you into places that are uncomfortable, places you'd rather avoid. If you've ever tried to sit still and focus on your breathing, you've probably noticed how quickly your mind starts to resist. Thoughts come rushing in, things you need to do, things you're worried about, things you'd rather not think about. It's almost like your mind is afraid of the stillness, afraid of what might come up if you stop distracting yourself. And that's exactly why the breath is so powerful. It doesn't let you run away. It brings you face to face with whatever is inside you, whether it's pleasant or not. This might sound difficult, but it's also freeing. Because when you breathe through those moments, when you don't fight them or run from them, you realize something important. The discomfort doesn't last. It rises, it peaks, and then it fades, just like the breath itself. And in its place, there's a sense of space, of ease, of clarity. It's not about getting rid of what you're feeling, it's about making room for it. The breath teaches you that you don't have to be afraid of what's inside you. You can face it, feel it, and let it move through you, just like the air moving in and out of your lungs. There's also a kind of mystery to the breath that's hard to put into words. Think about it. You can measure your breathing, analyze it, even control it to some extent. But where does the impulse to breathe come from in the first place? Why does your body know to take that next breath, even when you're not thinking about it? It's as if the breath has its own intelligence, its own wisdom. And when you tune into it, you're tuning into something much larger than yourself. Some people describe the breath as a kind of doorway. Not a physical doorway, but a way of accessing something deeper, something that goes beyond the mind and the body. When you breathe with awareness, you start to feel a sense of connection, not just to yourself, but to everything around you. It's not something you can explain or prove. It's something you feel. It's like the boundary between you and the world starts to dissolve, and what's left is just presence, stillness, awareness. If you've ever experienced this, even for a moment, you know how powerful it is. It's not about escaping or transcending your life. It's about fully inhabiting it, fully experiencing it, with all its messiness and beauty and uncertainty. The breath doesn't take you anywhere else. It brings you right here, to this exact moment, with all its imperfections and all its possibilities. And yet, for something so simple, the breath is endlessly mysterious. You can spend your whole life exploring it and still not reach the bottom of its depth. Every culture, every tradition, every person has their own way of working with it, their own way of understanding it. But no matter how you approach it, the breath always leads you back to the same place yourself. Not the version of you that's tangled up in roles and identities and expectations, but the you that's simply here, breathing alive. Think about the fact that your first act in this world was to inhale, and your last act will be to exhale. Everything in between, every thought, every experience, every moment happens within that span of breath. It's not just something you do, it's something you are. And when you begin to see it that way, the ordinary act of breathing becomes extraordinary. It becomes sacred. So the question isn't whether the breath is powerful. It's whether you're willing to see it for what it really is. Are you willing to let it show you what's already inside you? Are you willing to let it guide you, not to somewhere else, but to the place you've always been? If you strip everything else away, your thoughts, your emotions, your plans, your ideas about who you are, what's left? It's the breath. It's always been there, steady and quiet, moving in and out, like the tide of an unseen ocean. And yet, we rarely think about it until something forces us to. Maybe it's an illness that makes breathing difficult. Maybe it's a moment of fear, where the breath catches in your throat. Or maybe it's just the sudden awareness of its absence, like when you hold it for too long and feel that primal urge to take the next inhale. The breath is so constant, so reliable, that it's easy to forget it's also fragile. This is what makes the breath so powerful. It's not permanent, and it's not guaranteed. Each one is a gift, given and taken without any promises. And yet, in its rhythm, there's a kind of truth that's hard to ignore. Life itself is built on this rhythm: the inhale, the exhale, the constant cycle of taking in and letting go. If you look closely, you'll see this rhythm everywhere. Day turns into night, and night into day. The seasons come and go. People enter your life, and people leave. Nothing stays, not even the breath. And yet, it's within this impermanence that we find the essence of what it means to be alive. Think about the moment between the inhale and the exhale, the pause where nothing seems to be happening. It's so subtle that most of us don't even notice it, but in that pause, there's something profound. It's a moment of stillness, a moment where the cycle briefly stops before beginning again. That pause is a mirror of life itself. Everything we experience, joy, pain, love, loss, exists within the rhythm of beginning and ending. And just like the breath, there's always that moment of stillness in between, where everything feels suspended. It's not empty, it's full of possibility. When you breathe, you're not just keeping your body alive. You're participating in the same rhythm that moves through everything. The breath isn't separate from life, it is life. And when you start to really feel that, something shifts. You begin to see how interconnected everything is. The air you're breathing now isn't just yours. It's been shared over and over again by every living thing. It's moved through forests, across oceans, through the lungs of countless creatures. It's been part of storms, carried seeds, cooled the earth. Every breath you take is a continuation of something much larger than you. But the breath also carries a kind of inevitability. No matter how deeply you inhale, you can't hold on to it forever. The exhale always comes, and no matter how much you exhale, the inhale always follows. This is the rhythm of existence, and it's not something you can control. You can try to hold your breath, but eventually the body takes over. It knows what you need, even if your mind resists. The same is true for life. You can try to hold on to what you love, to avoid what you fear, but the rhythm keeps moving. Things come and go, whether you want them to or not. The breath teaches you this truth in the most direct way possible. If you've ever watched someone take their last breath, you know how profound this rhythm can be. There's something about that final exhale that feels both devastating and natural, like the closing of a chapter that was always meant to end. And yet, even in that ending, the breath doesn't stop. It continues in the people around them, in the trees outside, in the wind that carries the scent of the earth. The breath doesn't belong to any one person, and it doesn't end with any one life. It's part of something much bigger, something that keeps moving, even when we don't.